Hello and welcome to the Eye on the U podcast, Miami Herald's Miami Hurricanes podcast. I'm David Wilson. I'm joined, as always, on the other line by our Hurricanes beat writer here at the Herald. Susan, how's it going?
It's going great. How are
Uh,
you? It's
Pretty
going
good.
well. Lots
Uh,
of revolving doors that you
right,
have.
a little bit of a busy time of year, actually. We keep saying we're going to take a week off one of these weeks, but Miami and the college football landscape is making that impossible. Baseball also getting started up this weekend, which had you busy this week ahead of their season opening series against Penn State. Maybe we'll touch a little bit on that at the end. You have a big story that will be up by the time people are listening to this on Andrew Walters.
Yep.
Uh, but obviously, the big story down in Coral Gables this week is all of the coaching changes. Lance Guidry officially announced as the defensive coordinator on Wednesday. That came out? I think it was Wednesday. We won't dive too much into that. We talked about him most last week. We are waiting, and maybe the announcement will be out by the time people are listening to this. On Shannon Dawson is Miami's new offensive coordinator. Coming from Houston, also a couple other smaller changes. We touched on Charlie Strong leaving last week. They found his replacement at linebackers coach, and Miami now in the market for a running backs coach after Kevin Smith returned to Ole Miss. But let's start with Dawson. It's definitely, not just the big story of the week. I think the biggest story of the offseason for Miami was how are they going to try to fix this offense? Obviously, part of what they did is that they've rebuilt this offensive line to a point where it should be one of the best. Better line, definitely best line, one of the best lines in the ACC, maybe one of the better lines in the entire country. But the real potential game-changing move was going to get Shannon Dawson from Houston, a guy who's from the Air Raid School of Thought, coach for Hal Mumme at Southeastern Louisiana, who's kind of considered the godfather of the Air Raid, one of the founders of that system. Has been coaching for Dana Holgerson for a while, both at Houston and West Virginia. That's another one of the kind of modern air raid guys. It is not the direction I saw things going for Miami. Obviously, I think 24/7 had put his name out there as someone who Miami was maybe interested in. We'd heard Major Applewhite, similar kind of like spread.
Yeah, exactly.
Some guys that went in a different direction than Mario Cristobal, but I was kind of very much in like, I'll see it when I believe it. And now I guess I got to believe it because Miami, I'm not expecting Mario Cristobal to go full air raid. They're not going to run a Mike Leach offense all of a sudden, but it is a school of thought that I did not expect Mario Cristobal to go try to pull from this offseason. Are you as surprised as I am that this was the move?
Yeah, kind of. Although I think Mario, yeah, I guess we were surprised because he seems, that guy who wants the, like with Gaddis, he wanted someone really who was a little more, I don't know, conservative as far as running. You and I have said forever that we love the Rhett Lashley offense, throw the ball. So I'm really excited about this guy. So yeah, I'm kind of surprised, but maybe, I don't know, Mario. I mean, there's a lot of good things said about Dawson. So I love it. I love that he throws a lot. I love that his offenses have done well. I mean, again, it's not. I mean, Houston. It's some of these guys have not been at major, let's say, Power 5 schools, right. But a touch surprised, but pleased. Put it that way.
Yeah, I think so. We should say Houston, his offenses there were very prolific, especially last year. Just
Yes.
some of the most productive quarterback play in the country. I think 13th in passing touchdowns. They threw for more than 300 yards per game. A lot of the same type of passing numbers we saw Miami put up with Tyler Van Dyke a couple years ago when Rhett Lashley was here. Obviously, when Rhett Lashley came in, he had full autonomy, right? Manny Diaz, we joked a lot. He was basically like the head coach of the offense. Manny Diaz was so involved on the defense. I think Rhett Lashley was so clearly a guy that was about to become a head coach. He really could kind of, they were running a Rhett Lashley offense. There were no I don't think there was a whole lot of Manny Diaz influence in there. I don't expect that to be the case exactly with Dawson. Mario is obviously, well, first of all, I guess I'd say I describe him as the CEO type coach, right? Where he's much more like recruit heavy, hire a good staff. That those are his goals. But he is, he's an offensive line coach, very involved with the offensive line. He's an offensive
Right.
guy who I think will have a lot of input in how this offense is run. But to me, it's just a sign that I don't want to say that the offense that he wants to run would never work, right? Because I think if you recruit the offensive line at the way he thinks he can, if you recruit running backs at that level and you put together a good defense, you can win in old schools, like grind it out, like 4, 5, 6 yards in a cloud of dust. I know the old saying is 3 yards, but in college football, a good offense is hopefully running for more than 3 yards per carry. So I think that can work. I think we saw last year very clearly did not work. They did not have the personnel for that. And
Really, nothing worked last year.
Nothing worked. And the injuries,
No.
obviously, I think we should always say played a big part in that.
Big.
But as of now, they still have, maybe that offensive line will change things and you can run really well behind them. But as of now, they have much better personnel, I think, to be, when you have a quarterback like Tyler Van Dyke, you want to use him. You want to get the most out of him if you think that he is a potential first-round pick, which I'm sure around the program they still think he can develop into that with a good enough season. And this is for me, it's an acknowledgement for Mario Cristobal that like there's a middle path. It doesn't have to just be we're going to be burly and we're going to punch you in the mouth and we're going to beat you that way. I think Mario, here's how I'm thinking if I'm Mario Cristobal. My thinking is I can recruit offensive linemen to do that no matter who my offensive coordinator is. We can run well behind a good line no matter who the OC is. I need someone to add that extra dimension. Mario Cristobal has kind of historically, I mean, it's obviously like kind of the running criticism of him over the last couple of years has been that like Justin Herbert who's now in a lot of people's minds a top 5, top 6, top 7 NFL quarterback, was like kind of like not super impressive at Oregon. I think getting a guy whose greatest strength is getting the most out of his quarterbacks, whether that's developing quarterbacks, he's at least getting production out of them. I think that has clearly kind of been what has been missing from Mario Cristobal offenses over the years. Getting back to even before Miami.
I'm not sure this is like middle of the road. I mean, you're going from one extreme.
Well, yeah, they are, but I'm saying I can't. So my thought is I can't imagine they're going to go straight from one extreme and just run air raid this year. But I think it's Mario Cristobal acknowledging that there's somewhere what they were doing before was too far on one end, and you're trying to get a little bit more to that middle ground.
Yeah, definitely. Even though it's interesting because they ended up almost exactly even passing and as far as plays.
Yeah,
which I always point out. It's interesting. After all of that, it was kind of even passing, running,
mm-hmm.
But there were so many problems with.
Well, they were behind a lot.
What was that?
They were trailing a lot and had to throw.
Oh yeah. They were. Yeah, I mean, that's true.
Mm-hmm.
I just think with Tyler, you gotta throw the ball. I mean, now if Tyler's hurt, again, that's bad. That's
right.
Really bad. Okay. Then and I'm sure Mario is going to say, and so is Shannon Dawson, that they intend to run the ball a lot. They're going to say that. And I'm sure they do.
Mm-hmm.
I just think that this offense will be a lot happier. Although, again, we need to see some receivers.
Right.
Also, I mean, there's all kinds of things we can say about this. I mean, where are the receivers? And also, there's not. What about the receivers coach?
Yeah.
They're going to announce soon, I'm sure. Very soon, UM's bound to announce. They haven't officially announced.
Right.
Shannon Dawson. When we're recording this, I bet you they do. Maybe they'll do it today.
Yeah, probably by the time you guys are listening to this, there's a pretty decent chance.
Maybe. Yeah, maybe, but yeah, I like we that part of the puzzle is not real good right now.
Yeah, so I think so. Air raid. I guess we should like kind of mention like there's a difference between spread and air raid. Air raid, like the Mike Leach style air raid is you throw 60 times a game, right? Like you basically replace your running game. A lot of times schools run it when they have smaller offensive lines, stuff like that. You basically replace your running game with the short passing game. That's not exactly what Rhett Lashley did. I think that team didn't run as much because they were not good at running the ball. I think if that team had been a team that could give it to Jalen Knighton and he's breaking off six yards a carry or hitting home runs every once in a while, they would have run it more. And I expect that to be kind of the philosophy more for this team. You know, they're going to be big enough and talented enough up front that you don't need to run the classical air raid where it's like basically you only run 8 plays and it's like all slants and short throws and it's all yards after the catch. Like that is not going to be the way this team plays. I can't imagine. We don't know for sure, obviously, but I can't imagine with their personnel, you know, with what they think that offensive line can be. But I think it's you know, it's a good philosophy to infuse into what Mario Cristobal and that offense did last year, which was, I think, vanilla a lot of times, right? You know, they couldn't run super well, and they couldn't throw super well, and they didn't make life easy for their quarterbacks. You know, the air raid makes life easy for your quarterbacks. I think simplifying and making, you know, just letting Tyler Van Dyke make some easier throws will go a long way, as opposed to last year where it felt like they were always running and they were stuck in 3rd and long, and it's not a good situation for the quarterback. Obviously, if they run better, it'll change a lot. So I think I'm honestly just really interested to see what this offense is going to look like because they are two very divergent school of thoughts, right? Mario Cristobal would be happy to be a head football coach in the 1990s, right? Like that's his attitude is like, we're going to ground and pound. And obviously he's more evolved in that because there are no coaches who are running offenses like they looked like in the 90s, but like that is his ethos. And Shannon Dawson, we should say, like I said earlier, the air raid it's not the best offensive system. I don't think even like Mike Leach would have said that we have perfected offense here, but it was the air raid basically sprung out of the idea of how can we put together a good offense when we have like clear deficiencies in terms of talent. Like that is the origins of it. So I think, you know, anyone who goes into a situation like Miami where the talent is just going to be better than it was at Houston, better than Dana Holgorsen had it at West Virginia, certainly better than at Southeastern Louisiana, like he's going to shift. Shannon Dawson is going to shift away from that straight up air raid stuff. Like the air raid stuff is interesting, but it's not going to be what this is about. It's going to be about blending these two styles, and that
right. And they don't really know how their runners are going to be right now. I mean, they're you know, Jalen Knighton left, and transferred, and I mean, and they've got some new guys that you know you've seen in high school that are good, right? But you know, and they've got some guys coming back from injury. You know,
they got some big backs who they can play that style between the tackles. And then, as you mentioned, the wide receiver question mark is interesting. And that is where I think the air raid could be helpful because they've got a couple of guys who are, you know, some smaller receivers who I think like you get Brashard Smith on a slant with some room to run, like he could make stuff happen. Jacoby George, similar. So I think it's a pretty interesting, it's just a really interesting fit. The whole puzzle is going to be really, really fascinating, I think, to try to piece together.
Yeah. And I think it's probably getting fans really excited also. And I have a feeling the personnel also of the team. So,
I mean, we've never seen anything. I mean, Rhett Lashley, as we covered it extensively, was the first time Miami had ever gone away from the pro style. You know, Mark Richt obviously ran that. It was kind of the first time they were running that kind of like new age, Big 12 type offense. And this is just even more extreme, even though, as I keep saying, they're not going to just run air raid. I can't imagine like they're going to have to balance it all. And that's, it's like, it's kind of, obviously Shannon Dawson is not Mike Leach, but like, it was always like the idea of like, what would Mike Leach look like with Alabama talent or like real top end SEC talent? Obviously, I don't think he ever wanted that, right? I think he loved being the renegade at Washington State and then Mississippi State, like getting to be the underdog, but Miami's talent is obviously not there yet, but it can get there. And up front, I mean, they've got one of the more talented offensive lines in the entire country. So like, it's really hard to imagine what this offense is going to look like, but I just love the blending of philosophies. I like getting different perspectives on what a good offense can be and trying to piece it together and make something good happen.
Yeah, and I think it's amazing that this is the 5th time in 6 seasons that UM's hiring an offensive coordinator.
Yeah.
5th time in 6 seasons. That's that's
the problem.
From from Thomas Brown with Mark Richt to Dan Enos. That was Manny Diaz in 2019 to Rhett Lashley.
Mm-hmm.
It's just that's a lot of offensive coordinators for people to adjust to. So I really hope this guy sticks and is a success.
Yeah, I mean, it will be Tyler Van Dyke's 3rd offensive coordinator in 3 years as a starter. Like that, it's not ideal. It can work.
No.
I mean, we just saw Jalen Hurts go to the Super Bowl, right? And the whole storyline with him was this was the first year he ever had the same offensive coordinator for back-to-back years since he was playing for his dad in high school. Like, it's not in the way that football works now. I mean, even Alabama just replaced 2 coordinators, right? Like the way football works with the coaching carousel and the transfer portal, not just coaches changing schools, but players changing schools every year. Players are really adjusting to new coordinators and new coaches all the time. Continuity can obviously help, but for Miami, it's there's going to be more value, I think, in trying to go and coach to the personnel rather than, as I say, I compared it a lot, like
Definitely
round peg in a square hole. Like now they've got, they've got 2 different kinds of philosophies here and 2 different types of personnel groupings where I think the skill guys are still best suited for a more spread out offense and in the trenches. If the O-line, and they've actually got, their most exciting running backs are kind of bigger backs. They've definitely got like 2 different types of personnel, and it's just going to be, they got 6 months to figure out how to make it all work together.
It's going to be an interesting spring.
Yes,
right? That's
definitely very interesting spring.
With somebody new again. But I think also now again, they have not done this officially, but I think he's going to be the quarterback's coach,
right?
Also, which is interesting. So Dawson will have a dual role, as opposed to Frank Ponce, who left, as you were saying before this week went on the air or whatever we'd call this, interesting. People went back to their old schools. It's kind of Ponce went back to Appalachian State, but he was UM's offensive coordinator, and I guess he was UM's quarterback's coach, and he's going back to App State to become the offensive coordinator and the quarterback's coach. But I don't think that was, we might have said this before, I'm not sure they got along that great, Gaddis and Frank Ponce. I just think it's awkward. I think it's better to have one guy doing both if he can. So Dawson will probably be the quarterback's coach and the offensive coordinator. And then, of course, like we said, they'll be bringing in a new running backs coach, and maybe it's one of Dawson's guys.
Yeah.
Or maybe somebody Dawson knows or fits to his system or whatever. Kevin Smith was welcomed with open arms by Lane Kiffin back to Ole Miss. Anyway, sorry, I'm getting like texts from our editors as we record this. I promise I texted them and said I'm in the middle of a podcast, but whatever. Anyway, yeah. So I mean, spring should be interesting. It'll be interesting to see if Tyler, how much he competes actually. Although there's no there's no contact anyway for quarterbacks, but still, and you know how we find out that day all the people who have had surgery. So we'll see that too. But anyway, there'll be a lot of new people, including, are we allowed to say defense? We did, right? I mean, Guidry, the new defensive coordinator. We talked about him last week,
Yeah.
was announced, but also in the middle of media day, we found out that, they're hiring a new
Yeah. Well,
linebacker.
Look,
right.
Let's move now to talk about some of the other changes to the staff. You touched on Kevin Smith there. Interesting that he is going back to coach for Lane Kiffin again after 1 year at Miami. Honestly, I just can't remember ever seeing that where it happened twice with Miami where Frank Ponce comes from App State to Miami for 1 year, goes right back. Now Kevin Smith doing the same at Ole Miss. It leaves, as you said, 2 vacancies left on the staff on offense. Assuming Dawson is the quarterback's coach, you'll have to find a wide receivers coach, a running backs coach. I think that one of those guys has to be kind of a money recruiter, because that was Kevin Smith, the South Florida guy. They were kind of hoping he was going to be a really good recruiter for them. Obviously, we just didn't get to see a lot, but they did recruit running back in South Florida very well this year. As you also mentioned, maybe that is where, a wide receiver in particular, maybe Dawson gets one of his guys to come in, or someone who has, like you said, at least some familiarity. On defense, Lance Guidry, as I said, officially announced this week. We went deep on him last week. But Miami also quickly finds a replacement for Charlie Strong. Derek Nicholson coming from Louisville. Well, I guess he was he at Cincinnati? I think technically with Satterfield. He never coached. Same with Guidry. When Guidry was technically at Tulane.
Exactly. Interesting. Everybody's like hiring people after they've been hired.
Like I said, it's the real coaching. Like the coaching carousel is crazier than ever. But Nicholson, I should say, like Louisville recruits South Florida very well. Has recruited South Florida very well with Satterfield. They beat out Miami for central linebacker Stanquan Clark. Got an early commitment from him basically and hung on to it even when Miami tried to kind of make a late run. So I think at least from a recruiting standpoint, that's a pretty good hire. And I don't know a whole lot about what he is in terms of like a talent developer, but I think Charlie Strong was obviously a really good coach just based on his reputation. Although linebacker was obviously remained a big question mark. I still think that was more talent based than coaching based. But they obviously, that's been a huge position of weakness for a long time. And Nicholson, if he is a younger guy who can,
he's 36. He's 36.
He's young. Those guys typically are, get the reputation as being better recruiters, the young guys, right? They can relate, all that kind of stuff.
And by the way,
I think it's a good move to go get a guy who can maybe bring in some talent at linebacker, because that has been a real struggle for years and years and years to recruit guys in that position.
Yeah, and he was a former star at Florida State.
Yeah.
So
so Florida ties, obviously.
Right.
I think that's an interesting move. It's a pivot, like I said, away from Strong, who's not like the world's, he's an older guy. He's just, those guys typically shipped out of recruit mode. They're like, I can coach my way. Find the right guys. Don't want to put up with teenagers BS, right? Like I totally get it. But Nicholson is going to be, on paper, is a totally different type of guy, where I think his strength, again, I don't know anything about him as a coach, right? Like it's impossible to tell until you kind of get around a guy. But I think he's a guy who should be able to bring in the talent that is needed at that position.
Yeah. It's amazing, David, to me that UM's had 5 coaching changes already. I think it's 5.
Yeah, I mean, we thought there would be quite a few, right? After you go 5 and 7, we thought there were going to be changes. I mean, 5 is maybe a more than we thought, but
they happened. I mean, some of them weren't. I don't think. I mean, I'm not privy to the inside, the coach's office, but. Like we thought maybe Gaddis for sure, right?
Yeah.
But then people started leaving on their own.
And like Kevin Smith and Kevin Steele, obviously Bama poached him. And Kevin Smith. I mean, that's another
Oh yeah, and
surprise
Steele.
one.
Right. Yeah, Kevin Smith. Yeah, I guess the
I mean, even
strong
Charlie
thing.
Strong, like I think they probably would have liked to keep Charlie Strong as a linebackers
Yeah, I
coach.
think
Obviously,
so.
it seems like it was
Although
sort of a mutual like parting of ways in a
I don't know,
sense.
it's
But
yeah, I mean, he was not Strong was not happy
yeah.
apparently. Like we
Mhm.
said last, I guess he told ESPN that he, they didn't value him pretty much, kind of. That and I don't think he got a shot at the defensive coordinator job. So the guy was
Yeah.
a head coach, and so he took off. I mean, that was the whole thing of that was kind of surprising. Mario is a strong figure. He's a
Yeah.
very strong coach. I think that like Manny Diaz was more for sure the type that let people kind of do their own thing. I mean,
Mhm.
you had more leeway with him if you're like you were saying, he was defense and he trusted the people under him to do what, he was still the head coach, but Mario seems more of a controlling type to
Yeah.
me. So where you're saying he's kind of like a CEO. Yeah, but a CEO
Very
that's
hands-on CEO, yes.
hands-on, like
And then I
totally.
mean that is we've talked about it a few times, the fact that so much of last year's staff like were guys without prior relationships, like
Yes, really good point.
you do
I-
wonder how much, like some guys came in and they're like, all right, let's see what this is like. And maybe, on either end, maybe Mario, just like the connection wasn't there on either end. Maybe the guy leaving didn't like the situation. Mario didn't like the situation. Maybe that's, sometimes you
Or you have
realize it's not going to
strong,
work out. Yeah. Just like,
yeah. Hey, listen, Gaddis was a very strong personality.
yep. I mean,
Okay, and
Charlie Strong is a guy who's been a like Big East Coach of the Year winning head coach. Like they had some big names in there.
right.
And it's the old super team thing, right? Like the hardest thing to do is manage a bunch of, I don't want to say egos, but there's probably some of that, but just strong personalities, guys with
Yeah,
lots of opinions.
and I don't think the
who-
player. I mean, we've gone through this. I mean,
Yeah.
Gaddis was always very nice to us, but I don't think the players were particularly happy with this situation, from
Yeah.
what I've heard inside. So,
Mhm.
yeah. Now it just
Yeah.
doesn't
Sometimes you need
feel
like
like
good cop, bad cop, right? If Mario's going
Yeah.
to be like the strict guy, you kind of need the good cop in there.
Doesn't it feel like we're like starting all over again? Doesn't it?
Yeah. I mean, it's in some ways, it's like the after year one for Manny Diaz, right? I mean,
It really is. It feels
that
like
was the defensive staff mostly stayed intact that year. I'm trying to remember if there were any changes. But they overhauled the offense after year one there.
yeah. Well, then
The whole-
Manny became the D
He
coordinator.
became the D coordinator. Yeah, I guess
Like Baker, right? Wasn't it?
yeah. I think
I
he
just
left that year.
yeah.
Maybe that was after year two. I think that was after year two, actually. Blake Baker left. But
Yeah.
I mean, year one was the offense was terrible. They fired Dan Enos. They hired Rhett Lashley, and got that was Garen Justice came in as the new O-line coach. Yeah, they rebuilt the whole staff.
Yeah. It just feels he had to do it. He had no choice because people started leaving. But I just think, I don't know. It's not.
It's not the best sign that you
Yeah,
seem to kind of whiff on a bunch of hires in year one.
I just that it's like you feel like you're starting anew again. I mean, you have now we have a new defense and a new offense.
Yeah.
I
mean, it's I think Mario came in. I think Mario came in year one and thought, he clearly did not expect them to go 5-7, right? Like he did not think a rebuild was ahead of him. And I think he came out of year one thinking we got to rebuild. And that's what we're seeing a little bit now. This team should still be much better than 5-7 next year. It'd be like inexcusable if they don't make a bowl. It was kind of inexcusable if they didn't make a bowl last year. But I think better to get it right than be stubborn and wrong, I guess.
Yeah, I agree. This will be. I know.
But this is a test. You can't
has
keep
what is he at? He has a 10-year, 8-year contract.
Yeah.
8-year, is it? No, he has a 10-year.
10-year, 80 million.
80 million. 10-year. Yes. I mean, 10 years.
Just,
I like.
he's got a long leash still, I think, even
Not
after
a-
a
he's-
terrible year
yeah.
one. A much longer leash than Manny Diaz had coming out of year one.
Oh, for sure. I mean, if they have
but-
a horrific year this year, he'll still be here, but it'll be hell.
Yeah.
It'll be hell. So,
but I think he has like we're saying, he had the support of the administration to this extent where he could try to reboot things a lot after year one, and in a different way that I think Manny had to reboot and win right away because his leash was not that long. Mario, and kind of is the flip side. He has the wiggle room to say, we need to try something different. Give me a couple of years here and we'll get this thing going.
Yeah. I hope it happens this year.
Yeah. Before we wrap up, Miami baseball season kicks off Friday night against Penn State. You wrote a big story on Andrew Walters. You were out at Media Day on Tuesday.
Yep.
Tell me what Miami top 25 team going into the year. They're saying they feel like they got an Omaha caliber team. What do people need to know about Miami baseball real quick?
Well, I think they've got, I think 7 out of 9 position players returning, starters. Not in baseball, it's not like they started every game,
right? But the guys who were the main started the bulk of the games.
The main guy, the infield and stuff. I think they're going to be good. Hitting wise, they're hoping that they're pretty good hitting wise. I mean the starting rotation, they lost Carson Palmquist, right, in the third round. Who was their ace, and their pitchers. I mean, I'm not saying they're bad, but they're, when I look at their top 3, their starter, Gage Zeal, had a 4.04 ERA last year. Carson Ligon had a 4.90 ERA, and they didn't really announce him yet, but I think he's going to be the second starter. One of them, and Alejandro Rosario really struggled last year. He had a 7.05 ERA. And those are their 3 top starters. Now, again,
Rosario was a big recruit, and
they're top recruits and stuff. They got Yo-Yo. Yo-Yo Morales is kind of a preseason All-American type player up for
it seemed like potential top 10 draft buzz for him. So they definitely got some top end talent.
They do. And again, I wrote about Andrew Walters. He's amazing. He really is. I just want people to know that last year, I mean, the kids has like lights out numbers. You wrote about him too. But last year, in that game against Arizona, okay, when UM went down and they ended the season in the regionals, Andrew was on the mound, right? And he kind of collapsed. However, there were 2 outs. He struck out the first 2 guys, and the third guy, it was an easy out. It was a routine grounder to the shortstop, Patelli, who overthrew, no doubt, 100%. Okay, David, he overthrew the first baseman. He threw it over his head, and for some weird reason, UM scored it a hit, and it was definitely not a hit. It was an error. That game would have been over. It was a routine grounder. So, but he did collapse after that, Andrew. But I mean, he held batters to a 116 average. He had 14 saves. He struck out 62 and walked 6. Struck out 62 and walked 6. Over 32 2/3 inning. He's really good. So, and Gino, a lot of times these kids, I know we got to end this. A lot of times these kids like Palmquist want to become starters. Palmquist was a great closer. Right. He came back with a starter. This kid is just wants to help the team, and he's happy to be the closer. And he's 6'4", 220, 225. I think the question is, can they get to where he's on the map? Right.
Yeah, that's the problem. That's why sometimes you want your guy to want to be a starter, because closer only matters if you're winning.
Yeah, and Gino, I didn't even write this in my advance, but Gino said the starters were a problem last year because they didn't go long enough.
Right.
They only lasted 4 innings, 5 innings. You need them to last at least 6 innings. At least eventually, after they're held to a pitch count in the beginning of the season. Anyway, I'll be away this weekend, but I love UM baseball. Always love UM baseball. And
Yeah,
That's
we'll definitely talk some baseball as we go here. Also probably get into some more basketball now as football news. At least the two big storylines are done. Obviously,
oh yeah.
we'll touch on some smaller coaching hires as they continue to make them. But it's until spring, which is actually all of a sudden pretty close. Only a
Very
couple
close,
weeks
right?
away. Yeah,
Couple weeks.
3 weeks, I think. Maybe not even.
2 weeks from
2
this
weeks.
weekend,
Yeah,
maybe.
2 weeks. 2 weeks, I think, from Saturday or Sunday. I don't remember what day. But yeah, it's getting close. So yeah, we'll be back certainly over the next couple of weeks to get ready for spring ball. Because it's one of those busy times of the year where we got basketball, we got baseball, and the basketball team's obviously awesome also. So lots to talk about. Be sure to keep following the Eye on the U podcast. Follow Susan Miller Degnan on Twitter at smillerdegnan. Follow me on Twitter at dbwilson2. And we will talk to you guys a little bit later on.